there is something you haven't said out loud yet. Not because you don't feel it, but because feeling it already costs you something. And you've been paying that price quietly, in private, in the space between sleep and waking, in the middle of ordinary afternoons when something small reminds you of them, and suddenly nothing feels ordinary at all. This isn't about obsession. It's not even really about them. It's about what happens inside a person when they encounter something real, something that resonates at a frequency so specific, so familiar, it almost feels like a memory. And then have to decide, consciously, repeatedly, sometimes hourly, not to reach for it. What you're carrying right now has a name. It's not weakness. It's not delusion. It is the particular and very human experience of loving something you cannot freely have, and being changed by that love, whether you act on it or not. Stay with this for a moment. Let it breathe. Because what I'm about to say isn't going to flatter you or comfort you in a shallow way. It's going to ask something of you. Your honesty, your self-awareness, and your willingness to look at what this connection is really doing to you beneath the surface. You think about them more than you tell anyone. That's where this starts. Not in some dramatic confrontation or stolen moment, but in the quiet accumulation of thoughts that return without permission. A phrase they used, the way they looked at you in a room full of other people, the way they didn't look at you, which somehow said more. You've analyzed it, probably more than once. You've told yourself reasonable things, that you're being irrational, that you're projecting, but it's circumstance and not significance. You've had whole internal debates with yourself and declared yourself the winner. And then, 3 days later, there they are again, in your mind, uninvited. This is the thing about feelings that live in the suppressed register. They don't respond to logic because they weren't created by logic. You didn't decide to feel this. It arrived. And now it lives in a part of you that reason can't fully reach. They may not even know the full weight of what they carry in your thoughts. Or perhaps they do know, partially, and they are doing the same quiet work of containing themselves. That is its own kind of intimacy. Two people standing in the same room, or across a long distance, holding something between them that neither one names. There is a specific exhaustion that comes from feeling something intensely while expressing none of it. You manage it, you function, you show up to your life. But underneath the surface activity, something is running constantly. A kind of background hum that never fully goes quiet. You are not broken for feeling this, but you would be wrong to think it's nothing. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, not as the villain in a person's story, but as the repository of everything they've been taught not to be. Every feeling deemed too much, every desire deemed inappropriate, every part of the self that the conscious mind decided was safer locked away. The shadow doesn't disappear when you lock it away. It waits. And then something happens, or someone happens, and suddenly the lock doesn't hold the way it used to. This is what certain connections do. They don't just make you feel attracted or interested or emotionally engaged. They make the locked parts of you press against the door. They reveal, without your consent, what you've been hiding from yourself. Not just desire, but need. Not just want, but wound. Not just admiration, but a confrontation with something in yourself that you haven't finished understanding yet. The intensity of what you feel toward this person is not entirely about them. I want you to sit with that. Part of what makes this connection feel so charged is that it is reflecting something back to you. Some part of yourself you've been ignoring, some quality you've been denying, some version of intimacy or aliveness that you've told yourself you don't need or don't deserve or don't have access to. They become, without knowing it, a mirror for your own unlived life. This is what makes the feeling so disorienting. You thought it was about them, and they are real. Their presence is real. Your connection is real. But beneath the feeling is also a message from yourself to yourself. A signal. A pressure from the interior that says, something in you is unfinished. The pull you feel isn't just pulling you toward another person. It's pulling you toward a part of yourself that's been waiting. This is not a comfortable thought. It's not meant to be. Growth rarely comes wrapped in comfort. Now for the part that makes this so complicated. The relationship is forbidden. Not in a dramatic sense. Not because anyone has issued a decree or drawn a hard line in front of you. But in the quieter, more durable sense. The sense that is built out of real-world circumstances, competing loyalties, existing structures, and the weight of what breaking those structures would actually cost. Maybe they are committed to someone else. Maybe you are. Maybe the situation involves a professional or social boundary that was put in place for legitimate reasons. Maybe the timing is genuinely wrong, not as an excuse, but as a fact. Two people arriving at the same place years apart from each other in ways that cannot simply be overridden by feeling. Or maybe the forbidden quality is more internal. Maybe it's about who you understand yourself to be and how this feeling doesn't fit that understanding. Maybe it's about fear of being that vulnerable, of being that visible to another person, of wanting something this much and risking that much wanting. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with this territory. You can't fully confide in most people about it. The feeling doesn't fit into the usual categories that conversations are structured around. It doesn't have a clean story. It resists reduction. And so you carry it with a kind of discipline that nobody around you recognizes as discipline, because to them you look fine. The forbidden quality doesn't make the feeling smaller. In some ways, and this is worth being honest about, it makes it larger. There is a psychological principle at work here. That which is restricted gains intensity. The thing you cannot freely pursue becomes the thing you think about freely, constantly, almost compulsively. This is not a character flaw. It is how the human psyche responds to prohibition. It is the nature of suppressed energy. It doesn't dissipate, it concentrates. Understanding that mechanism doesn't dissolve the feeling, but it does give you a place to stand while holding it. And a place to stand is not a small thing. There is something happening between the two of you that doesn't require words and doesn't require proximity. You already know this. It exists in the pauses, in the messages that almost got sent, in the things that get said in a way that means something slightly different from what the words technically contain, in the moments when the conversation goes somewhere and then both of you, mutually and without discussion, redirect it back to safer ground. There is a push and pull that operates on a frequency that other people around you can't necessarily detect. They see two people having a normal interaction. What they don't see is the restraint underneath it, the calibrated quality of every word, the awareness in both of you of exactly how much ground there is and exactly where the edge of that ground is. The silence has a density to it. The distance has a texture. When you don't hear from them for a period of time, the absence is not neutral. It has weight. You notice it. You probably wonder whether they notice it too. whether the same quiet is sitting in their chest the way it sits in yours. And when they do appear, a message, a chance encounter, their name appearing somewhere unexpected, there is a response in your body that is faster than thought. Before your mind can interpret anything, your nervous system has already registered the information. That is not nothing. That is a biological fact about how deeply something has lodged inside you. The waves of it are not consistent. Some days the feeling is distant, almost manageable, almost theoretical. You can think about them without the feeling overwhelming the container you've built for it. And then something shifts. A memory, a reminder, a moment of quiet. And the feeling is right there again, with the same force it had at the beginning. This is not regression. This is the nature of anything unresolved. It returns at full strength until it is actually processed, not merely suppressed. You are not losing ground every time this happens. You are being shown what still needs attention. Here is where I need to ask you to expand your frame. Because as long as you understand this only as a story about two people and an obstacle between them, you are only seeing part of what is happening. And the part you're missing is the part that actually has power in it. This connection is asking something of you that has nothing to do with whether or not you end up together. It is asking you to look at yourself fully, with less negotiation than you usually bring to that exercise. It is asking you to look at the places where you've been emotionally dormant, the relationships where you've been going through the motions without real presence, the parts of yourself, creative, passionate, alive, unguarded, that you've been keeping carefully managed because full aliveness felt dangerous. Something about this person cracked that management, and that crack, as painful as it is also a form of information. What did they activate in you? Not in a sense of what feelings they sparked, but in the deeper sense. What version of yourself arrived when they were present? What did you want to say that you don't usually want to say? What did you feel capable of that usually feels out of reach? What quality of attention did you give and receive that you've been starved for without fully realizing it? That is the content of the awakening, not the person, the version of you that appeared around them. Jung called this process individuation, the long, non-linear work of becoming more fully yourself. Not the self that was shaped by fear or compliance or other people's expectations. The deeper, more authentic self that carries your actual nature. This process is not comfortable. It is frequently triggered not by ease, but by disruption. Not by things going smoothly, but by things cracking open. This connection is a disruption. And disruptions of this quality, when moved through with consciousness, do not leave you diminished. They leave you more real. The connection is not the destination. It is the catalyst. This is the part where I want to talk about you, not in relation to them, but in relation to yourself. Because the danger in an experience like this is a specific one. That you give the other person too much authority over your interior life. That they become, without your full awareness, the keeper of something in you. That your sense of aliveness becomes contingent on their presence or responsiveness or acknowledgement. That you begin to mistake the feeling they activate for something they are providing, rather than something you are generating within yourself. They are not providing it. You are. That distinction matters enormously. Everything you felt in their presence, the sharpness, the depth, the feeling of being seen, the quality of wanting something real, those are qualities that live in you. They were not installed by this person. They were uncovered. And what is uncovered can remain uncovered. That is within your agency.
The work now is not about them. It is about refusing to lock that version of yourself back in the room just because the particular circumstances that open the door are complicated. You are allowed to carry the aliveness forward without carrying the attachment forward at the same level. These are separable things, even though in the heat of the feeling, they seem fused. This also means being honest with yourself about what you are actually seeking. Because sometimes what feels like longing for a specific person is also, beneath that, longing for a kind of relationship you haven't let yourself ask for.
Longing for depth that your current circumstances don't contain. Longing for permission, your own permission, to want things fully. To stop moderating yourself down to a version that feels manageable to everyone around you. If that's what's underneath this, then pursuing this particular person, or waiting for them, or preserving yourself in amber in case something changes, is not actually the answer to the longing. The answer is in the question itself. What do you actually want? And what have you been telling yourself you can't have, and why? Sit with that not as accusation, but as inquiry. Not to punish yourself, but to understand yourself more precisely. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel fully and think clearly at the same time. To let the feeling inform you without letting it govern you. To honor what is real in your experience without constructing your entire life around an unresolvable circumstance. You can acknowledge what this connection meant, what it revealed, what it cost, what it gave you, without making it the center of gravity around which everything else orbits. You get to move. You get to take what you learned and actually live differently because of it. That is not moving on in the diminishing sense. That is integration. That is the thing the experience was for. Now there's what I want to leave you with. Not every connection that is profound is meant to be pursued. Not every feeling that is real is a directive. The intensity of what you feel is not, by itself, evidence of what you should do. It is evidence of how much capacity you have for depth, for connection, for presence. And that capacity deserves more than to be spent entirely on something that cannot receive it. What this person means to you is real. What you feel is not something to be ashamed of or analytically argued away. But meaning doesn't require resolution to be valid. The experience doesn't need to reach the outcome you initially wanted in order to have mattered. The clearest people you will ever meet are not the ones who have never been destabilized. They're the ones who were destabilized, who stayed conscious through it, who didn't collapse into the feeling or run from it, who let it move through them and teach them something they couldn't have learned any other way. You have the option to become one of those people through this. Clarity is not the same as indifference. You can be clear and still feel everything. Clear about what you need, clear about what you can offer, clear about what serves your actual life and what holds your actual life in suspension. The silence between you and this person, whatever that silence contains, does not have to remain a place where you're just waiting. It can become a place where you're working, on yourself, on the questions this has opened, on the parts of you that came alive and deserve to stay alive, regardless of how this particular story resolves. Stop asking what they feel. Start asking what you need, not what you want in the charged sense, but what you need in the structural sense. What kind of life, what kind of intimacy, what kind of presence do you want to build and inhabit? Build it. Start now, not when this is resolved. Now, because the most grounded thing you can do with an experience that shook you is refuse to let it leave you in the same place it found you. You are not meant to stay the same person you were before this happened.
That's not a poetic idea, it's a practical one. You have been shown something about yourself, about your capacity, about what you've been tolerating in exchange for safety. That information belongs to you now. Use it. The feeling will soften, not because it wasn't real, but because you gave it somewhere to go, inward and forward, and into a version of your life that's more honestly constructed than the one you were living before it arrived. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything.